Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network, where me and Dallas King make our way through the A24 filmography and interview the talent involved along the way. In this episode, we have our second interview from St. Maud as we welcome the film's composer Adam Janota Bzowski. While St. Maud is now screening in the UK, there's no date yet from A24 for its American release. This interview contains only minor spoilers for the film, but I'd recommend tuning in after you've seen the film. It's the best way to check it out. St. Maud is about Maud, a newly devout hospice nurse who becomes obsessed with saving her dying patient's soul, but sinister forces in her own sinful past threaten to put an end to her holy calling. Thanks to Adam for joining me, and I hope you'll check out St. Maud in cinemas if you feel it's safe to do so, and enjoy the show. The film is open to great acclaim. Obviously, last week it got to #1 in the UK box office. Congratulations. What's it been like to be involved in a film like St. Maud?
Well, I mean, from the public reception of it, it's pretty crazy. Well, we were supposed to release in April of this year, 2020. So it's been really crazy to see it all over billboards, on buses and everything in London and the UK. It's quite surreal. You know, this is my debut score as a composer. So for it to be attached to a film that's doing so well and being so incredibly well received, it's very surreal for me.
Obviously, you touched on it there. The film's still delayed in the US, but in the UK, we finally received it. I mean, I remember seeing it last October, so it feels like a lifetime for me alone to see it in cinemas again. Obviously, now that it's out, people seem to be really getting behind, obviously, the film and supporting it. You know, I see people like Edgar Wright. There's lots of fantastic kind of British directors, etc., promoting the film. What's it like sort of being in the middle of something like this where St. Maud is kind of become, it's like the tagline, you know, your saviour's coming. People seem to be really championing this film and trying to encourage people, if they feel safe to go into the cinemas and see it.
Yeah, and it's a weird juxtaposition, what with the, you know, the context of, you know, this global pandemic that everyone is experiencing and encouraging people to go to the cinema. It feels slightly at odds with, you know, my own kind of mindset, but at the same time, those places seem very safe. So it kind of seems okay to do that. But you know, it's amazing that so many people are coming out and championing the film, like you say. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that we probably need this at the moment. You know, good films in general are our sense of escape. It's where we go. You know, I can't remember. There's a film that probably says it, where we go and think we're somewhere else for a while. You know, we're somebody else. And I think that's kind of what we need. We need that opportunity to forget what's going on and just kind of be free and have a good time. And so it's great that people feel they can do that with St. Maud, even though it's quite an intense experience.
Was there a moment sort of, I just think I remember a couple of weeks ago, just a few days before St. Maud was released, that you have Cineworld closing, Picture House closing. Was there an element of doubt thinking, this film might not actually come out this week, it might be delayed into next year? Did you have any sort of worry that might be the case?
Oh, dude, 100%. Like, you know, I think we went into lockdown the week or so before we were supposed to be releasing the film. And then I remember us being told that it was going to be released, and then they introduced this new tier system, the 3-tier system in the UK, and I was like, "Oh man, this is it." You know, we're going to be locked out again. And I haven't heard anything about the US. You know, the distributors, A24, have been very silent, and I imagine they because they have to be, and AMC, I think, which is the largest cinema chain in the US, that's basically bankrupt or something, I've heard. So, you know, it's really quite morose, not just for our film, for St. Maud, but for cinema and films in general, everything seems very uncertain. And I think that kind of made people feel like, is this the last hurrah for cinema? Maybe I need to go and see something before there's nothing. Seems quite bleak.
Before sort of St. Maud came along, what inspired you to sort of pursue a career in film composing and sound?
If we talk about sound in general, sound, literally sound itself is what I've always been in love with. And not just music, music is organized sound. I think John Cage said that. And that's very much how I feel. It's a seemingly a series of innocuous noises that you piece together, and that's what we call music. And that's what I really love. When I talk about getting into film composing, that was really very lucky for me as a chance that I was given specifically with St. Maud. Before that, I actually worked mostly in advertising, which is not relatively rewarding for the mind, but at least so for the bank account. But, I originally wanted to be an artist, drawing and graphic design. But back in GCSE, high school, my art teacher went round the class and told everyone who he said should carry on to do A-level. I wasn't one of those people. So I had to choose either music or art, and I chose music instead. So I was kind of forced into it in some respects because I wasn't encouraged. And then from then on, I just kind of, like I said, I was working in any way I can. And the Maud thing kind of came about quite by chance.
What were the film, soundtrack, composers and sound designers that you liked and felt inspired by?
Film music, for me, was never really something I considered until quite recently. Definitely, I thought about it a lot more since I was asked to work in film and the way music moves to picture. But, really, when I thought about this question, I found it hard actually to think of specific films in my youth that I thought about the music at all. More, I thought about the entire experience. I was more amazed at how films got made in general. They seemed like a almost impossible task. That when the credits roll, there's so many names that you think, how is this possible? How did this even happen? But leading up into making St. Maud, films like Under the Skin, Mika Levy's score for that is, next level. Johnny Greenwood, and for what's that film? You Were Never Really Here, the Lynn Ramsey film. That's some of the coolest sounds I've ever heard. But it's weird thinking about it. When you ask me this question, I kind of feel a bit embarrassed that really I haven't really been inspired by film scores for much of my life, which I would imagine other contemporaries might say otherwise.
What's it been like to turn that passion, that experience into a career? That we know what the road is like for doing it as an actor. What's it like for someone like yourself in your field?
I think it's got a lot to do with certainly, privilege and where you come from seems to be a huge impact on what you're able to access in life. So I've been extraordinarily fortunate, and it's important to recognize that. So, I got to go to university and study music, and that gives you a real boost. But most importantly, I think, as with everything, it's people and doing good work. I spent a long time building relationships with people and honing those skills. But the step into the movie making business was I managed to meet the producer, Oliver Kassman, who runs Escape Plan Productions. And I asked him to give me a shot, almost like applying for a job on this film. And it was only through doing a huge amount of demos, about 40 minutes worth of demos for St. Maud that I managed to get this job. But that comes at a long line of about 10 years of working in the music industry. That's a lot of failed projects that I've done myself before I landed upon the success that seems overnight with St. Maud.
You've touched on it there. You worked on a range of projects over the previous sort of 10 years. What were you able to sort of take from those roles that you were able to bring into something like St. Maud?
Well, working in adverts, you generally have to do a very short turnaround. So, a project can come in the night before that they need the music. It's very last minute. They've shot the advert. They have what's called a temp piece of music. Let's say whatever, James Brown piece of music. Then they call you and say, we can't afford this. Can you make it? And that forces you to become very flexible and very adaptable. You have to work very quickly. And the first ideas have to be good. Otherwise, you run out of time. So in some respects, that's been an amazing skill to learn. It's also furnished me with the ability to afford to pay for equipment, whereas I think most musicians, especially modern ones, when you're working with computers, they all are familiar with cracked software, and the limited free trials that come with those things. So being able to afford the equipment that really can help bolster your sound is really, really important. And I'm very lucky to have been able to do that. But then there's a whole range of things that, I've done: animation, installation. But I normally came at it from a sound designer point of view. Originally, I was a sound designer because musicians were all too common and no one really wanted my music. So in the score for St. Maud, it's actually quite a dense textural and sound design-led score. It's not that musical. And a lot of that comes from my background working in sound design.
You touched on it about sort of how you managed to get your shot at St. Maud. At what stage do you come in at? Do you come in at, there's a script to read, what kind of sound and music can you be inspired by? Or do you kind of come in after shooting's finished and you have something to work to on screen?
So by the time I got involved, this was January 2019, maybe 2018. I'm terrible with dates. They'd already finished filming, and I was sent what was called a treatment. So it was kind of just an overview, a synopsis of the film that Rose had written, just outlining what was going to happen and what it was about. And bundled with all of this was a lot of imagery, kind of inspirational photography from different artists. Very, very macabre and incredibly spooky pictures. So I didn't get a script. I just had this outline that Rose had made. And from that, I made 40 minutes of demo music in order to pitch for the job. Kind of like, here's what I think it should sound like. And luckily, when I went for the interview, I went up to their studio in Finsbury where they were editing to meet everyone. And I could hear my score through the walls of the editing suite. So I kind of had an inkling that perhaps maybe I was the person they were looking for, since they were already using my music, but I couldn't be sure. And only later did I start getting reels, cues, scenes of the film to start piecing together.
As you were starting to piece things together, what was that kind of dynamic like between you and sort of the director, Rose Glass? Is she quite clear on what she's looking for from the kind of the score and design, or do you kind of get quite a lot of kind of creative freedom?
Originally, what we did was she gave me the whole film, outlining where the cues were meant to go, and she said, you do what you want, and so we'll see what you come back with. And I did that, and I would say 70% she said, no, that I don't want any of that, which was somewhat disappointing. No one wants to be told you've done it wrong. but you always knew with Rose that she was right. Whatever she said, it was succinct, it was clear, and you knew it was the correct direction. So once we started to find our thrust, as she called it, we very, very quickly honed into the correct direction that she was looking for. Her general criteria was nothing traditional, nothing too trad. So none of this kind of sweeping strings and, you know, lovely bouquets of music. She wanted it to sound very obscure, very strange, very weird, which was such a treat for me to hear, because it's very rare that in my line of work I got to be weirder, stranger, and dig into the sound more, which was, I was so lucky that she wanted that from me.
We often find when I kind of love to watch like documentaries about the making of films, and I always find sound designs and scores quite interesting. And one thing I've always kind of picked up from them is that directors can sometimes get quite attached to temp scores or inspirations. Was that kind of the case with St. Maud before you came in and were able to sort of bring along your score? Was there any sort of temp scores in place already on the film?
Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of cues that had been placed that Rose and the editor Mark Towns had placed onto everything, but the general sense was that Rose didn't really like any of them. They kind of fit the bill in moving the scene forward, but very few of them did what she wanted them to do. The only sticking point where we had a problem with what's called temp love, like where people get obsessed with this cue, was excuse me, was it's in the soundtrack as I Think It Went Well, and it's the scene where it's kind of this montage where in the middle of the film Maud is enjoying her relationship with Amanda, and she's bathing and she's doing the signs of the cross with holy water around the house. And we had this track, I think it was from Hereditary, so Colin Stetson's score. And it had this really lovely, lulling, kind of quite Sunday morning feel to it. And I just couldn't get it. I just couldn't get it right. And we landed on something, and it went out to all of the festivals. And actually, right up until the final film was sold to A24, did we actually change that cue. So people who watched it at LFF actually will have seen a different film score to the people that will see it commercially now.
That blows my mind. I saw it at LFF and then obviously saw it again last week. And it's obviously been so long, I never realized I sort of potentially saw two different versions of that film. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really, but that's what I loved about Rose. She's like, you know, it's got to be how I want it to be. And it was almost impossible for me to think that people would be making last minute changes that late. But then I remember reading about the guy who directed Cats, you know, and he like changing it right up until the day of cinema release. So, you know, you got to do what you got to do to make your film right.
What sort of setup did you have for scoring St. Maud? Is it home studio, or are you working somewhere else? What's your kind of setup, the tech, and kind of, is it an orchestra? Is it all computerized? How did you bring this score to life?
So yeah, I've just got a little studio at home. I'm very fortunate to have my own space in which to do it. It's all in the box, meaning it's all in a computer. That's how I work best. I haven't found much success with, you know, reams of outboard gear and synths and stuff. I can achieve what I like in my computer. I started making music on something called Fruity Loops, which is a very rudimentary piece of computer software, which actually a lot of people use. I think Hudson Mohawk uses it still. And a 4-track tape recorder for cassettes. And that's actually what most of the score was made on. I was living at the time with a flautist called Katie Banks. and I called her down, and we spent about 2 hours recording her play the flute. I hadn't written any music. What I was looking for was a unique set of sounds to sample, because I generally work with recording audio and then heavily manipulating it. So we kind of pulled her flute apart and got to blow in it and make all of these strange honks and hoots and textures. That was then manipulated through tape, slowed down, because you can do this little pitch wheel on the tape, so you can slow it right down. And as you do that, the sound stretches and lowers, and you find all of these strange, interesting, unique tones. And you process that through a bunch of guitar pedals and the computer. And a lot of the score is consisting of that 2 hours that I spent with Katie. So there was no orchestra. You know, I'm using, like I said before, the software and the stuff that I've been able to afford through my previous work. In particular, there's a company called Spitfire that make all of these amazing orchestral noises. So I manipulate those a bunch, and it was just there, just me and my cat at home making weird noises.
That's amazing. How long did you sort of spend altogether on kind of creating this score? What was your kind of time spent on Saint Maud?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to quantify it in actual hours and minutes. It was a very long process. In January, when I made the demo, I spent 2 solid weeks making the demo, and about half of that made it into the film. And then we were pretty much working on it till about, I want to say August. But it's not every day. It was, you know, a lot of back and forth and waiting. And what I made Rose was something called I think I called it a color box. And it was kind of a snippets and weird blips and bloops and textures and drones, a whole collection, a whole palette of noises named variously curious things, which then I gave to her, and she could place and collage as she liked. And then she would send that back to me, and I would finesse it and refine it. So through this process, I kind of gave her almost a new set of things to temp to the film, which I would then finesse. So this kind of back and forth, you know, took a while to get right, but actually when we got going, it made things go a lot faster.
The film's, we've touched on it, has got this incredible sound design when you mix in your score, the sound effects, the practical effects, what was shot. Do you get much involvement in sort of that final mix in terms of how your score is placed within it?
Not really, no. I remember seeing the final mix. We went to Halo post-production in Soho, and they've got this, you know, it's this enormous spaceship of a mixing desk, a massive cinema screen, and like 6 very comfortable seats. And it's this very private, very intimate, you know, cinema with huge sound. And by this point, you know, Paul Davies had already done all of his sound design, and that came in after my score. So he kind of had to fit in around the density of what I had made. And Andrew, the mix engineer, pressed play, and then I just watched it. And I didn't really have any notes. I didn't have anything to contribute with regards to how I thought it should be. It was really Rose and Andrew that kind of had their hands fully on how it was molded, what was made louder and what was made quieter, all of that aspect. I just let them do what they thought best served the picture, and I thought they did an amazing job.
What are some of the highlights of your soundtrack for you when you hear it playing in the film? What do you think is some of your best work on it?
Well, I mean, nothing can compare to hearing something you've made on your computer at home on speakers that are twice the size of you. You know, it's the bass response is so intense that it kind of takes you aback. But, you know, my favorite pieces, I definitely really love, there's a track called Succubus. I think that sounds really cool on the big screen. But the last track, as the credits roll, which is called Saint Maud, is, you know, it's very hard left turn from the rest of the score. It's a very sad, lamenting piece of almost classical music played on a bunch of clarinets and stuff. And that piece of music, I think, really plays into the heart of the film, which is a film not about horror. It's not necessarily a horror film. It's a film about sadness and loneliness. And that final piece, if you can be bothered to stay as the credits roll, I think it's a beautiful moment to reflect on what you've just seen. And that's my favorite piece.
One of my highlights of the score and is that the fact there's this Saint Maud theme. What kind of inspired? What was it like for you to see this kind of character of Maud, and what did it evoke in you as you were sort of composing music about this kind of character and her journey?
So I knew the film touched upon religion. And religion was used mainly as a device and not really a comment on religion at all. But this got me thinking about the palette of noises that, you know, Maud would be inclined to, you know, resonate with. So I was kind of interested in using choirs. So the theme features this kind of very soft hummed, you know, motif, which I really liked. Originally, that cue, the St. Maud's theme, is meant to be placed, when I'd originally written it, it meant to be placed when Maud's going up the stairs and she experiences the ecstasy of God in quite an intense way. So I think if you play it over that scene, there's like a throbbing of the lights, which actually moves in time with the music. But Rose moved it to you know, the beginning of the film when we're introduced to Maud and she's doing her voiceover, because she felt it was the theme that Maud would like to attribute to herself. You know, this very devout, very pious person that has a very somber but very direct soundtrack, which I thought was really smart because it worked so well, and it's not where I intended it to go. That's testament to Rose's direction.
When did you get to see the film for the first time, fully completed with an audience, and what was your reaction?
Mine was at LFF, so it's very possible that we were in the same theatre together. It was like a packed audience, and it was very intense. I felt very nervous. I felt very exposed, and I found it quite hard to concentrate sometimes because with every note that was being played, I felt like I was being judged. But obviously, it wasn't about me. You know, everyone was in the moment. Everyone was enjoying it, and I imagine maybe that was the same for everyone. You know, maybe the actors, every time they saw themselves, they kind of winced in their seats. I don't know, maybe it's different for everyone, but it was a very powerful and very surreal moment because, you know, I'd always wanted to work in film scores and film music because I always felt that's what my music lent to best. And to be sat in that room and it happening in front of me, I couldn't really get my head around it.
We spoke about it earlier that the film has opened to UK audiences to huge acclaim and fantastic reviews. And what makes me happy is that in all those reviews, there's a lot of mention of the sound design and the score and how that adds to the film. What's it been like for yourself to see such kind of tributes paid to your work on the film, and especially with it being your first film too?
Oh, I don't know, man. It's like, it is what it is. It's like everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame, and it's just nice that people people are being complimentary is one thing, and that's great for your ego and all. But also that they're spelling my name correctly, because there's a lot going on there. So it's always like exciting to hear people say it and to see people write it down.
And what's kind of next for yourself now that St. Maud is beginning its journey out into the world and audiences are meeting it? What kind of comes next for yourself? Have you been working on any exciting kind of projects we can look forward to in the future?
So off the back of St. Maud, I landed another film called Here Before, which is an Irish film directed by first-time feature for Stacey Gregg. It's produced by Rook's Nest, who did The Witch and Surge and a whole bunch of amazing films. So I've just finished that, which was really great. It's got Andrea Riseborough in it. Really neat, kind of little kind of spooky drama, which I have no idea what's happening with it, because obviously everything's in a state of flux. I've just been confirmed on a new project called The Origin. I'm not sure how much I can say about it, unfortunately, but again, that's another first-time director, Andrew Cumming. I'm really excited about that one. I think that's going to be really, really wild. But who knows what's in the future? Hopefully more work. That's at least what I hope.
Can it be frustrating as a professional when, I suppose there's a lot of people experiencing what you've kind of gone through, where you've done this work which you're amazingly proud of and can open potential doors for your career, and then it sort of gets stuck in that kind of limbo period of kind of lockdown? Will it come out? Will it not come out? What's that like in your kind of professional opinion when you're sort of sat there watching things like that happen?
It's very stressful. I mean, I just wanted St. Maud to come out. I just wanted it to be over, which is kind of a bad thing, I think. I was getting very anxious, but I think that's playing into a lot about the uncertainty of everything we were experiencing. The whole, when will this end and what's left at the other side of it? So I think really that was a product of that. But I've kind of learnt that these things are out of my control. Like I said earlier, these films, they have so many people involved that really once you're signed off, once your job is done, it's out of your control and it's up to higher powers. So there's no really point thinking about it. You just got to wait and see what happens when it happens. You've got to be as pragmatic as possible.
We pose this question to everyone that we have on. You touched on one of their films earlier on, Under the Skin and Hereditary. What are some of the highlights of the A24 filmography for you?
Oh man, I mean, endless. I could name endless. A24 is just synonymous with some of my favorite films. It's just such a good brand. They just nailed my taste, and I'm sure so many people love them for that reason, and they're probably quite hated for that reason too. I mean, I think obviously we have different distributors for the UK, but they are associated with In Fabric, which was a Peter Strickland film, which didn't get nearly enough rep. It's so weird and so cool, and the music by Cabin of Antimatter is fantastic. High Life, Claire Denis, another fantastic sci-fi which went under the radar. I loved that. And also, they've got Lanthimos, Yorgos Lanthimos films. Killing of a Sacred Deer specifically was one of my favourite films of that year. They just nail that kind of left of centre, austere, bizarre, and beautifully filmed and crafted cinema, and that's what I'm really lucky to be part of their pantheon.
Where's the best place for people to check out your work, follow along with your career, and up to date with any kind of news, Adam?
Well, I'm on social media, although I don't know how useful it is as a medium for anyone wanting to know anything about me. So, I'm on Twitter. I used to go under this pseudonym Adam Halogen, which is where I released some music under. So that's what all of my socials are on Twitter and Instagram. I post a lot on Instagram, lots of cool pictures that I take. But I don't really know if there's like a, one-stop shop for Adam News, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Adam. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening to this. It's great to put a voice to the man that has terrified a lot of people in the cinemas lately and made them forget. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate it.